Hey everybody, Chris Baker here from LuckyGunner.com. It is once again time for a Q&A video. Today's question is one that's been asked by several viewers. It has to do with a specific shooting technique I use. Whenever I am shooting a shotgun or a rifle that does not have a pistol grip, I rest my right thumb along the side of the stock like that, rather than gripping it around the tang like most people do, like that. Anytime I post a video that shows me using that technique, at least a couple of people will ask me if there is a specific reason I grip the gun that way. Sometimes they'll suggest I might have more control over the gun if I were to wrap my thumb over the top. One gentleman went as far as to call the thumb forward position politically correct BS. I cannot begin to imagine what kind of conspiracy theory led him to that particular conclusion. That said, most people asking seem to be genuinely curious about the technique, so I am happy to explain it. I do not use this technique on long guns that have a pistol grip. For those, I use a conventional technique with my thumb wrapped around the grip. For almost all other long guns, I typically rest the thumb in a forward position. This is not my technique. A lot of people grip long guns with the shooting hand thumb forward. It is certainly nothing new. It's just not how most people seem to do it. I don't know if it has an official name. For now, I'll just call it the thumb forward grip. Technically, there are several different ways you can grip a long gun that involve a thumb forward position. So there's really not just one thumb forward grip. I have seen different instructors teach a thumb forward position for different reasons, depending on the context and the type of gun. I don't believe this is an issue of correct versus incorrect technique. Plenty of people shoot really well with both thumb positions, but it's probably something worth trying to see if it offers any advantages for you. In my case, I have found 4 major benefits to shooting long guns with the thumb forward. The first one is that it prevents me from getting smacked in the nose by my own thumb when the gun recoils. Now, this mostly applies to shotguns, but can also be an issue with lightweight or large caliber rifles. If you have a good stance and you mount the gun properly with a stock that's the correct length for you, this really should not be an issue most of the time. The gun should not move enough for you to get popped in the nose with your thumb. But if I'm, let's say, helping out somebody who is new to shotguns, I will suggest they keep that thumb straight, because I know there is a pretty good chance that at some point over the course of that range session, they will have an imperfect mount or an imperfect stance. If they use the thumb forward technique, they still might end up with a bruised shoulder, but they won't have a bloody nose to go with it. Even for a more experienced shooter, if you ever get into some more advanced training exercises or something like 3-gun competition, you might find yourself shooting from really awkward or unconventional positions, or you might be shooting under intense time pressure. Your stock might get hung up on a heavy jacket when you're trying to mount it in a hurry. You might end up in a weird spot and you can't guarantee that you're going to get a perfect mount before you need to pull the trigger. The thumb forward technique doesn't fix any of that, but it does help mitigate some of the consequences of taking a shot under less than ideal circumstances. Nobody likes to punch their own self in the face, and this is a good way to avoid that. The second benefit I have found to a thumb forward grip is that it allows smoother operation of bolt action and lever action rifles. Now notice that I said smoother and not faster. I cannot personally guarantee that I can cycle a bolt or a lever any faster with my thumb forward. I have seen cowboy action shooters run lever actions with their thumb forward, and they're incredibly quick. If you've ever seen someone do the mad minute with a bolt action infield, they will use an unusual technique where they leave the thumb and forefinger on the bolt and pull the trigger with their middle finger. I guess that's kind of a version of the thumb forward technique, but I don't do it because I think it's faster. I do think it is smoother. When I'm trying to cycle the action quickly, the thumb forward does seem to help prevent fumbling. It's a more efficient motion with the thumb forward. It's less movement and there's less opportunity for me to mess up. and do something weird with my thumb that might cause me to short stroke the action or make some other mistake. It also allows me a little more freedom in how I have my hand and wrist positioned. That's especially helpful with a lever gun because I can sometimes get a better angle on exactly which portion of the lever I am putting pressure on so I can cycle it more reliably. Another aspect of smoother operation is manipulation of the safety. Now this applies mostly to bolt actions. The majority of modern bolt actions have a safety positioned somewhere just behind the bolt handle, usually up on the receiver here. A thumb forward grip puts my thumb in the perfect position to flip that safety on and off, and I always know what position the safety is in because I can just feel it with my thumb. A slightly modified thumb forward position also works pretty well for guns with a safety that's on the back of the tang, like the Ruger American and the Mossberg 500 series shotguns. The third major advantage of a thumb forward grip for me is trigger control. For rifles and shotguns, I like to press the trigger using just the pad of my index finger. Depending on the shape of the stock, that is not always easy to do if I have my thumb around the tang. For my hands, I've got long fingers, so the trigger reach ends up being too short, and so I have to bend my finger in an awkward way, or I'll have to pull the trigger with the first joint of my finger. Now, that's not really a big deal if I'm just hosing targets up close, but if I want any kind of precision, I prefer to use less finger on the trigger. With my thumb forward, I can shift my whole hand to the rear away from the trigger, so I get just the pad of my trigger finger on there, and the rest of my index finger is relatively straight. For me, that makes it much easier to get a clean trigger press straight to the rear without disturbing my sight picture. Now that's a solution that is very specific to my hand size and shape, which is just one reason why I don't expect this technique to necessarily be right for everybody. And speaking of benefits that don't necessarily apply to everyone, the fourth and final reason I like a thumb forward technique is that I just find it to be more comfortable. The wrist angle I get with my thumb forward feels better to me. It is far more comfortable when I'm shooting from a bench or from a prone position. I really don't do either of those things a whole lot, but it is convenient to have just one way to grip the rifle regardless of what position I'm in. As far as I can tell, the main objection or concern people seem to have about this technique is that it might result in less control over the gun. To be completely honest, I'm not sure what specifically people mean by the word control. If they're talking about recoil control or recoil management, it's really a non-issue. I don't manage recoil with my thumb. I use the push-pull method for that. So just before I fire, I push forward on the fore end with my support hand. With my firing hand, I pull the stock into my body. That is done with the bottom three fingers of my firing hand. The thumb is just kind of hanging out. It doesn't really help me there. If people are concerned with control in the sense of supporting the weight of the gun, again, the thumb doesn't help. It's at least not when I'm actually in a firing position. If I need to hold the gun with just my firing hand, then I will wrap my thumb around the back of the tang and hold it like that. When I'm shooting, it doesn't really do anything for me though. It's, again, just kind of hanging out there. Here's a clip from a couple of weeks ago when I was experimenting with reloading techniques on the M1 carbine. Without consciously thinking about it, anytime my support hand came off the rifle to grab a fresh magazine, my firing hand thumb just shifted to the back of the tang to help manipulate the rifle. Not a big deal, didn't take a long time. It's not something I had to practice, it just kind of happens. There is one sense that I can think of in which a thumb forward grip might give you less control over the gun. And that would be in the case of some kind of gun grab situation. If I had the gun mounted, someone took me by surprise and tried to yank it out of my hand, then yes, I would probably stand a better chance of hanging onto that gun if I had my thumb around the tang, because suddenly the pressure I need to support the gun is coming from a different direction. But considering the likelihood of that event and all the other advantages I get from using a thumb forward technique, that's a risk I'm willing to take. Whether or not you decide this technique is for you, I hope you guys have found some of that to be helpful. If so, do me a favor and hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. And you guys know me, if you have any questions you want me to tackle here, you can just shoot an email to askcb@luckygunner.com. If you don't know me by now, you will never never, never know me.